Hey, so in this video I'm just going to explain some of the most common pitfalls beginners run into when they first get started with Microthemer and how to overcome them. So quite a common question is my styles are applying in Microthemer but I can't see them when I view the site outside of Microthemer. So just to give you an example, if I set this Google font here, increase the font size a bit, it's a bit too much. And then I were to go and view the site in another browser, let's say, where I'm not logged in, I don't get to see my changes here. And that's because the most likely reason, there's a few reasons for that, why that can happen, but the most likely reason is that you haven't clicked this publish button here. So if you click that, then your changes will be visible on the outside as well. By default, Microthemer, the changes you make in Microthemer are all saved in as a draft. And then once you're ready to publish, you can click the publish button, and then the new changes will be visible to regular site visitors. And then if you go ahead and make more changes, those additional changes will only be visible to you until you click the publish button. So site visitors will always see up to what you've done just before you click the publish button after making some new changes. But there's another reason as well. If you happen to have some sort of caching enabled on your site, then you'll need to clear your cache after making some changes in Microthemer. So just to give you an example, I'm using Kinsta for my hosting, and they have a cache clearing option here. Kinsta is a hosting company, but they have a plugin that integrates with their caching system, and so does, I think, Site Origin. There's also various caching plugins like W3 Total Cache, Auto Optimize, WP Rocket, that kind of thing, and they'll all have somewhere in their settings they'll have a button for clearing the cache, or sometimes it's called purging the cache. Another reason why you might see the changes in Microthemer but not outside of Microthemer is if you've accidentally tapped into a logged in class. So when you're working with Microthemer, you're always going to be logged in, because Microthemer you can only use Microthemer if you're logged in as an administrator. So if I just click on this option here, I'm just going to expand the advanced options actually, and I'm going to go scroll to the body tag. Oops, we want this one here. Yeah, and you can see this logged in class here. And Microthemer will pick up when you select an element like this heading here, or if you click directly on the body tag, it will always find the logged in class somewhere. So here we go, yeah, it's logged in. And if I was to click on this and then search, it's found it as here we go, it's like setting the context that only this link for logged in users. And so if you've accidentally tapped into, used one of these in your selector, then you'll find that the settings are visible for you but not outside of Microthemer. And so to change that, we could click here and then delete this, or there's another option if you want to just retarget visually. Click this option here, and then we can click on this and then choose an option, either the default, or it makes sense to call this the site title A option. And there's also, I'll just save that, there's also another instance where your CSS might be visible in Microthemer but not outside of Microthemer. And let's see, so I'm just going to return to this selector here, and I'm going to edit the code directly. So one problem that can happen is if you just enter some invalid CSS, like via this editor. So if I start with a closing curly brace, that invalidates my selector here. And you can see some warnings here, but you may not catch that straight away. It's also possible to enter some invalid CSS via the UI if you enter something strange in the property values. It's less common. But to find, and what can happen if you enter some invalid CSS, what can happen is that the selector where there's a problem, it won't work, but also subsequent selectors won't work. And this isn't always obvious in Microthemer because of the way Microthemer loads its styles dynamically, but when you're working with a style sheet, which is what visitors see on the front end, it's what's loaded on the front end, then in a style sheet, all the settings, all the CSS is within one style tag, or one style sheet, rather, and so it can break everything subsequently. And I'm just showing you that once we've viewed the generated CSS, we can look out for these little red X's. CSS is quite forgiving. Normally if you make an error it doesn't affect subsequent styles, but there are just certain edge cases where you enter some invalid CSS and then the browser just doesn't process any more CSS after that. So let's go ahead and fix this now. And then finally, there's a fourth reason for why your styles might not be showing on the front end. This one's quite rare. I think it happened, it was reported quite a lot with, what's it called, Visual Composer by WP Bakery. There was some modules in there that used dynamic IDs, so maybe there'd be like an image slider or something. So here we've got another example of where it says empty grid content or entry content. What it would have is, say, a name and then a series of numbers, random numbers and letters. And page builders use random numbers and letters often in their markup, but that's not a problem because the HTML classes or IDs that use these random strings, they stay the same on every page load. But if they change on every page load, then when you click on something to target it with Microthemer, it's valid for that one instance, but then when the page is refreshed, the CSS selector no longer targets anything on the page. So that's the final reason why your selectors might not, your CSS may not be affecting the page outside of Microthemer. So now let's talk about just when things don't happen quite as you expect. So sometimes you might try and apply a setting and it just doesn't work for some reason. Now, Microthemer has a setting in the preferences which is enabled by default where it will add important to your CSS styles. This is just there for beginners. Developers tend to turn this setting off. But what it does is it just means that Microthemer styles trump other styles set by the theme or whatever you've used to build your site without having to think too carefully about the rules of CSS specificity. And this is something for beginners to learn when they're ready, but Microthemer just has this option enabled, so most of the time when you try and click something and apply a new style, it will actually work. But there are still times where beginners can be tripped up. So I'm going to give you an example here. So I've selected this heading here, and if I go to the font groups to try and change the color, I'm going to try and change it to green. That doesn't work. And the reason is that there's actually an element inside this heading, a link element. So I've still got this HTML pane over here. You see I've clicked on the heading 4 element, but there is a link inside here. And if this link didn't have any color setting itself, it would have inherited that green setting that I set on the heading. But if we look at the computed CSS, we can see it's actually got a explicit red setting. We can see that in the style sheet as well. Yeah, this is the theme is setting a color of red here. So in order to change the color, we need to set a new color explicitly on this element. So I clicked here, but actually if and it looked initially like I was selecting the element I wanted, but just to be careful, if you want to select a particular element, try and click right in the middle of the text so you know that you're not selecting a container for that element. So now if I set the color to green, it will work because I've overridden that this color in the style sheet here, so we can see that's updated. And the reverse is sometimes true as well, actually. So in this case of setting the color, I wanted to set the innermost element, the link element. But sometimes I might actually want to select the container element for what I'm trying to do. So this link element is what's known as an inline element. So it displays the width of the element is controlled by the width of the content within, whereas a block level element, this heading 4, only has this much text inside it, but it still fills the width of its parent container, which is this element here, which has some padding, which ends here. And so if I wanted to, say, center this link element here, and I go to the text options to do that, and set align center, nothing happens because, well, it's only as wide as the text anyway, and so there's nothing. It can be centered within this area, but you're not going to visually see anything. So actually what I want to do is click on the heading element and then set the text line to center, and then that will center within the available space here. So another question people ask is, how to apply the same styling in more than one place. So here we've set the green, the link here inside the heading to green, but there's a few others on this page we're looking at here. So how do we target multiple elements? And this is actually one of the reasons why you might use Microthemer instead of a page builder, where often you work on the styling individually and then have to repeat yourself. So because we've already created a selector, rather than create a new one, we can click on the, let's just click the link, so I'm going to change the green color, and then we choose this retarget option here. And then we could choose from a list of options here, or we've also got the options down here. And because we know from looking just a second ago that there are 3 headings, sometimes it's easier to jump to the option here without having to scroll through the list for 3. So I've clicked that, and now if I look down, Microthemer has applied the styling to all of them. And so we can just click update in order to confirm that. And sometimes we also, we don't just want our style to apply to multiple elements on a single page, we want the styles to apply across multiple pages. So if let's just have a little look at our selector here. Yeah, so we've, this selector included the an ID of post 2. And that's just because Microthemer, when it was looking for selectors to choose from, it found a parent selector and it favored an ID because that has high specificity. And it's just part of the default way it works. But if we wanted this play link, if we were using this on other pages of the site, we could go ahead and delete that here, date, or there's also, we can also choose from the list of alternative options here as well. Sometimes Microthemer just might pick up some HTML that's specific to a single page, other times it won't. The CSS it generates by default is global, so it'll appear on every page, but if you don't tap into, say, simple, broad, global classes, like here I've updated the selector, so it's only going to target things with, as long as they have this play link class, it will target anything with that class. It doesn't matter what page it's on, where on the page, that kind of thing. Whereas if there was a context set, like inside grid container, then that would limit the styling. So sometimes you just need to choose a broader selector to get your styles to affect more of the site. If it's not affecting as much of the site as you want, when you've chosen one of Microthemer's default selectors. Conversely, you sometimes might find that you select something. Let's say I've selected. Oh, I'm still editing. Hang on, let's cancel that. So I'm going to create a brand new selector, say, for this setting here. This list item. So it's inside the page builders section. But maybe I've got a page builder section on another page on my site, and when I think I'm just styling this one list item here, it's actually applied somewhere else. And to avoid that from happening in the first place, if you choose this option where you have page ID, what that will do is it will set the page context for this selector to be valid. So and it's the current page, whatever. This bit section here. This always outputs the specific class that's assigned to the current page only. So if you have this enabled, you'll know that your selectors are only going to affect the current page. And again, you can go and edit selectors you've already created and add this option here if you've noticed that they're affecting too much of the site when you only want to affect one page. So finally, I'm just going to finish by talking about error messages. So what Microthemer does is it looks for any kind of JavaScript error on your site. The source of that could be another plugin or a theme. It might be Microthemer itself. And the reason it does that is because you're loading your WordPress site inside Microthemer. If there's an error for some reason, doesn't matter why it was caused, sometimes it can interfere with the selection process. So Microthemer wants your site to be in good working order so that doesn't happen, and it will alert you at the top right here. It will be a little yellow alert saying there's an error. And if everything seems to be fine, you can ignore it. But if it concerns you, or if you notice that it appears when you try and do something in Microthemer, then by all means let me know about it, and I'm happy to help you troubleshoot the error, even if it's nothing directly to do with Microthemer. So yeah, it's just a little inbuilt health check that can be really useful. But you can, if it's bugging you, you can turn it off. Here, monitor general JavaScript errors on your site. You can set that to no if you don't want that to happen. Okay, so I think that's everything. Thank you very much for watching.